Welcome to everyone who is here in our audience and to everyone who is watching via Zoom at home. I'm Amy Ford, I'm the branch manager for St. Mary's County Library, and we're so pleased to bring esteemed author Nnedi Okorafor to our audience here at Leonardtown High School, as well as library users across Maryland and beyond, I hope. For our online audience, please see the real-time captions if you would like, and our ASL interpreter is here in person as well as online. This program is made possible by the sponsorship of St. Mary's County Library, Calvert Library, Howard County Library, the Hilda C. Landers Library at the St. Mary's College of Maryland, and Maryland Libraries Together, a collaboration of Maryland public libraries to engage communities in enriching educational experiences that advance an understanding of the issues of our time. You can catch the recordings of this program on the St. Mary's County Library YouTube channel. If you're here in person, we have books for purchase following the event, and you will have the opportunity to have your book signed as well today. So please also join us tomorrow at Lexington Park Library for our annual Lexicon, an event for people of all ages who love comic books, science fiction, fantasy, gaming, and superheroes. We have activities for all ages starting at 10 a.m. and we look forward to seeing you there. So let me introduce our conversation host this evening. Kelsey Bush is a lifelong St. Mary's County resident and is currently the Community Affairs Liaison for St. Mary's College of Maryland. Previous roles include Interim Chief Diversity Officer at the college and the Local Management Board and Youth Coordinator for St. Mary's County Government. He is the President of the Board for Walden Wise, Secretary for Historic Sotterley, and a founding board member of the Patuxent River Naval Aviation Museum Foundation. He was appointed to Historic St. Mary's Commission by Governor Hogan and to the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture by Governor O'Malley. If there's anybody who knows the St. Mary's County community, it's Kelsey. So thank you for being part of this conversation.
Thank you for asking.
And now to introduce the author that we are so eager to hear from. Nnedi Okorafor is an international award-winning New York Times best-selling novelist of science fiction and fantasy for children, young adults, and adults. Born in the United States to Nigerian immigrant parents, Nnedi is known for drawing from African cultures to create captivating stories with unforgettable characters and evocative settings. Nnedi has received the World Fantasy, Nebula, Eisner, and Lodestar Awards, and multiple Hugo Awards, amongst others, for her books. Nnedi holds a PhD in literature, 2 master's degrees, journalism and literature, and lives in Phoenix, Arizona with her daughter, Anyago. Learn more at nnedi.com, and you can also follow her on X and Instagram. We are honored to have you here. Could we please have a round of applause? Thank you so much.
Nnedi, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I'm going to start out with a softball question for you.
Okay.
I'm going to start out with, what was your favorite book when you were a child?
Favorite book when I was a child? Well, first of all, I was a big reader. You know, that if there was anything that was a sign that I'd be doing what I'm doing, probably the only sign that I'd be doing what I'm doing today, it was that I read a lot. I spent all of I was an athlete, but when I wasn't on the tennis court or on the track, consuming stories. And what was my favorite book? I would have to say, Comet in Newman Land. Tave, I think it's Tave Jensen. I think that's how you pronounce it. Okay, so
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a surprise because most people are like, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
I vaguely remember.
Yeah, she's so this was like a series of, okay, so the Moomins, there's a series of books about these characters called Moomins. And I mean, the only way I could describe them is they were like intelligent bipedal hippos. If that makes sense.
Okay.
So,
I can see that.
Yeah. Very like very civil. They like drink tea and at tea parties and stuff. And yeah, so the Moomins, I love the Moomins. And it's funny because up until Amazon came into existence, I thought this whole thing was a figment of my imagination.
And then Amazon
And
brought
then
it forward.
yeah,
It brought
then
it
I
forward.
found them on Amazon. But yeah, that it was a Comet in Moomin Land was one of the Moomin books. And this particular one was about a comet that the Moomins, so they were very natural. You know, they lived in nature and there were all these creatures. It was this magical kind of magical, almost pure world, which is really cool. And one day a comet appeared in the sky and it was getting closer and closer. And they thought it was the end of the world. And so that's what Comet and Moomin Land is really about. So to me, I'd like to say that Comet and Moomin Land was the first first apocalyptic narrative that I ever read, because that's really what it was about. It's about preparing for the so. But it was a very pleasant, chill, atmospheric.
Bringing forth death.
Yeah, yeah. There's always that underneath that.
Well, the thing is, it kind of brought forth a light in me that seems to be, because my next question is, how'd you get started writing science fiction?
Okay, so the way that I started writing is its own story. Do
Okay,
you want me to tell
Sure.
you that story? Okay. Okay, and then the way that I started writing science fiction, specifically science fiction, was different than the way that I started writing. So those are three different answers. Okay, so
we've got time.
okay, we have time. All right, because the story of how I started writing is it's a long story. I can't just say, oh, as a kid, I wanted to write. I wrote. It's not that for me, it wasn't that simple. I didn't grow up wanting to. I didn't grow up with an attraction to storytelling at all. I was an athlete. I love sports, and I love two things: sports and then bugs.
Yes, because I read that you wanted to be an entomologist.
Yeah, I wanted to be an entomologist, and actually, the T-shirt that I'm wearing, which you can't see, but it's kind of pressed. I just love. I love bugs. I always have since I was little. I've always loved bugs. So I thought I was going to be an entomologist. Everyone thought I was going to be an entomologist. It's known as the bug girl in the neighborhood. And so yeah, so the bugs and then also sports. Those are my things. I was athletic from the beginning. I come from an athletic family. Both of my parents were athletes. My mom made the Olympic team in javelin in Nigeria.
Okay.
And my dad was a nationally known and award-winning hurdler.
Oh,
So
wow.
they were both they were athletes. And so and all of my siblings were all athletes. So for me, or actually all three. So I have three older sisters. I have to tell this because this is all part of the story.
Okay.
Two older sisters, or three of us were all 1 year apart. And so and then I have my brother who's 7 years older than me. And we all played. My parents loved tennis. They just loved tennis. And because we were athletic, we could do anything except for swimming. That's correct. Just sick when it comes to swimming. But because they loved tennis, they put us in tennis.
Okay.
And we excelled in tennis. We were really, really good. We were like Venus and Serena before Venus and Serena. So that was how I got to see the United States, that's how I actually came. Yeah, I've been almost to all of the states through touring as a semi-pro tennis player. And so that was my identity, sports. So, and then my senior year, I did track and field. I took a little time off of tennis and did track and field. And I did the high jump, the long jump, hurdles, the 400 and the 800. And then I went to state in the 800, 400, and high jump. And then the mile relay as well.
Not an overachiever by
yeah, well, that's right. I come from that kind of family. But and I placed in state in two of those events. And so and we won state in tennis. So athlete, I'm just saying athlete. And so, okay, so just to rewind a little bit, when I was 13, I was diagnosed with scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine. It's very common. Lots of people have it, but mine was really, really aggressive, and it got progressively worse as the years, because I was average height, and then I was tall, within 6 months, I grew very fast. So I think that was part of it. Also, my tennis game was really dominated by one side of my body. I had a very powerful forehand that I could run around and set out forehand, and I could hit 114 mile per hour serve. So I have that. So it's half of my body. I know. So it's like half of my body. That threw off my spine also, years of doing that. And so Once again, athlete, that's my identity. Then when I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana and I was on the tennis team. And after my first year, went to the doctor, did an x-ray on my spine, and they saw that my scoliosis had progressed. It was really bad. And I had no pain, no nothing. It's just, I might have looked a little weird, but I was performing at such a high level athletically, that didn't bother me. It didn't make me insecure at all. But they said that if I didn't have the surgery for this scoliosis to correct it, that I would be crippled by the time I was 25 and my life would be significantly shortened because all of my organs were going to get compressed. So of course I'm going to have the surgery. I didn't think anything of it. They said that I'd be back on the tennis court within a few months. And they said, yeah, there's risk when you're dealing with the spine. There's always a chance of paralysis. There's a 1% chance. And that versus 100% chance of all that other stuff, I knew what I was going to do. So I had this surgery after my first year of college. And I went in, and then 9 hours later, woke up paralyzed from the waist down. And they did not know if I would ever walk again. They did not know why I was responding that way. They said that I was in the 1% chance. I was in that 1% who responds mysteriously to that surgery with paralysis. So you take an athlete who could do all that from a young age, like I was always athletic. That was my identity. So you take somebody who could do all that, and then you paralyze them and have them in that hospital bed. That is a recipe for losing your mind.
Yes.
So for me, it was just, especially in those first few days, and then also the mystery of it. It's unexpected. I had never had anything bad happen to me. I was 19 years old, you know. And so it was in those first few days where I started understanding, like, literally, it was like there's a line here. Below that line was like my body disappeared. And then above it, it was me. And it was in those first few days where I knew my mind was breaking. I was sure, I was like, if I don't do something, I'm going to go to a dark place and never return. And that was when I had a copy of Isaac Asimov's I, Robot. And so I had that book and I was in too much pain to read it. And so I just started writing a story on the edges. And that story was about a woman who could fly, a woman from Nigeria. It always went back to where my parents were. So it's a woman from Nigeria who had the ability to fly. And when I look back now, it's very clear when you can fly, you don't have to walk. So it was like a coping, something, it was my mind just trying to cope with what was going on. And really, to make a long story short, that was how I started writing. I'd never written anything creatively up until that moment. It just had never, it didn't click. It didn't cross my mind. Both of my parents are doctors. You know, in my family, you don't go into the arts. It's just not normal. So like, it just didn't cross my mind to do that. It was in that moment of just pure darkness where it's just descending on me that my mind just turned to storytelling. And as soon as I started doing it, it was like a light switched on, you know, and that light kind of pushed all the darkness that was descending on me, pushed it all away. And so what ended up happening was that because I come from a very aggressive family, they put me in physical therapy even when I did not think I could do it. I'm like, I can't feel my leg. You know, what am I in physical therapy for? But they put me in it. And I just started, I went into training mode because I was already an athlete, so I already knew how to do that. That was something that made sense to me. So I just went into training mode. And I remember there was one night where I was just looking at my feet and just willing my feet to move. And I'm like looking at my toe. And there's in the movie Kill Bill, there's this moment where she says, wiggle your big toe, which is experienced atrophy. I had that moment where I was looking at my feet and just willing something to move. And at one point I saw my toe just in the middle of that. And that was when I knew, okay, there's still connection there. Okay, let's go. And so from that point on, slowly the sensation started returning to my legs. They don't know why. They didn't know if it would. And then with the training, I ended up basically having to relearn how to walk. And that was over that. I was completely paralyzed for some weeks. And then over that summer, I relearned how to walk. And so I went from a wheelchair to a walker to a half walker to a cane and returned to U of I using a cane. And I also returned to U of I telling these stories because I never stopped storytelling from that moment of being in that hospital that like I remember it clearly. And then by the next semester, a friend of mine looked at what I was doing and he was like, you should take a creative writing class. And I didn't even know what creative writing was. And it was really because I had a crush on him that I took a class.
At least you're honest.
Yeah, I have to be. Every time I want to skip that part. But yeah, I mean, that was the only reason I took the class. I was like, I didn't know what creative writing was, but
It's
he was
your heart has led people down many different paths.
exactly.
So,
And this is a good story.
and we appreciate that.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. But like, yeah, so I took that class and it opened up a world. Like I knew what to call what I was doing, and then I learned the techniques of writing and short stories and all of that. And that's really how I started writing. And from like I was writing a novel by which I don't recommend to recommend this route. I was writing a novel by the next semester after that. It's just a story that did not end. So because the stories have always come to me really big. And so that's how that happened. Now the fantasy part, that's really like I'm Nigerian American. Both of my parents born and raised in Nigeria. They came to this country in 1969 and I was born here. But from a young age, my parents have been taking us back to Nigeria to connect with family, culture, all of it. And not just connect, but like interact with it, argue with it, bond with it, fight with it, all of it. So those trips were really special. Those trips were very foundational for me as an American, as a child of an immigrant, and as a person. And so when I had that time to start when it was my turn to tell the story, when it was supposed to come from me, my mind just instantly went to Nigeria. It wasn't like something that I thought about. It's just that's where the stories. That was just like a natural, like almost a magnetic thing. And one of the things about being Nigerian American is that like when you go and you're interacting with things, you hear and notice things that are different from what people who are born and raised in the culture care about because it's certain things that are normal to them. There's certain things that are not that I wouldn't say normal, but like they're unusual. They're new to me. And what my mind was attracted to were the spiritual and the indigenous spiritual and cosmological practices, those ideologies. I would always be attracted to those. My sister, same with my sisters and my brother. And so once I started writing these stories, I found that even before I was a writer, I was obsessed with all that. But once I started writing these stories, I found that I could talk about those things that a lot of those things were taboo or people didn't want to or people were scared of things and all of that. And in writing stories, I could explore those things without anybody, getting on me about it. And so that's what I started writing about. I started writing about those cosmologies, those I don't want to say mythical creatures because people believe it, certain practices, spiritual practices, those started showing up in my stories automatically. And when people would read my stories, they'd say fantasy. And I'm like, I'm writing fantasy. I'm
writing truth.
This is real. Like what? And so that label just started getting slapped on because I was writing memoir type stuff, and then people would read it in my creative writing classes and say that it was fantasy. And I was like, okay. So at some point, I did, kept doing what I was doing, but I also just kind of just jumped over the line. I'm like, okay, you want to see fantasy? Let me just kind of
let me go a little further.
Yeah, let me go further. Yeah. So that was where the fantasy came from. The science fiction, however, came from the same place. It all for me comes from Nigeria. It always starts with Nigeria. And with science fiction, it was during those pivotal trips, as I got older, I would always notice technology you know, and I started understanding the politics and the political issues and the arguments people were having. Because at first, as a kid, it was just paradise. It's just fun, 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 fun. And then as I got older, I started understanding things more. And then I started especially noticing technology when cell phones came. And I was like, this is really interesting. You have this small supercomputer that's chargeable. And then we would be in places that were where there was no running water or electricity, where you have to use a generator for electricity and all of that. And then you bring cell phones into that kind of environment. And I thought that was fascinating. Like I would see really traditional moments, cultural moments with the cell phone thrown in there. You know, you'd see like the palm wine tapper going up a tree and then leaning back to look at his cell phone, that kind of thing.
Taking an instant,
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of thing. And so that started making me wonder about the future in this part of the world. Like, what will that be like when you have, you have this super technology that jumps over a lack of infrastructure? Like, what kind of what's the future going to be like there? And I wasn't seeing that in stories. I wasn't seeing anyone writing from that point of view, from the people there. It was always from someone from the outside coming in, making observations or having adventures. But what about the people there? And so because I wasn't seeing it to read, I decided to start writing it so that I could read it. So that's how I came to science fiction.
Yeah. That is a journey.
Yeah.
And, I appreciate you sharing that with us. You mentioned how you're tied to, in essence, the homeland. And out of that, you have created this terminology, African futurism. How does African futurism connect the history of Africa to the imagined future? That's the first portion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think it needs to be connected. I think that the future is part of it. It like is part of African futurism by definition. It's the past, present, and the future are all intertwined and interacting, and so it's like it's not something that needs to be connected to. It's not something that needs to be added or combined with. It's there. It already is. And so like a general philosophy that I have is that all cultures of the world imagine their futures, all of them. It's just that we just see one, we just see one part, or we hear limited points of view on what our futures will be like and what will affect our futures and what our technology should be. And this is something that I've always had to take an issue with, because I think that if different parts of the world participated in the global think tank, we would be much farther along as human beings.
I have to agree with you completely on.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you take in how many cultures have been left out of,
Yes.
of the conversation and should be at the table.
Yes.
So,
and like, if you think about it, when it comes to creating new technologies and ideas, everyone creates from their own need, their own specific need. And if we have only a limited number of points of views that are creating from their own specific needs, then we're losing out on so many ideas that we'd never have if, that so many ideas that would never exist if those ideas were not brought forth to the global think tank. That's why I'm always talking about the global think tank, because I think we'd be more balanced, we'd be more considerate of a lot more things if we heard from different points of views. Because right now we have a lot of amazing technologies that are created by a limited perspectives. And then others who didn't participate in that take those technologies and adapt them to whatever they need, which is great. But I think we would just have so much more if these things were created by many different
which takes it to you've touched on it and kind of in your answer. How is African futurism different than traditional Western science fiction?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about point of view.
Yeah,
it's really about point of view. I mean, for example, traditional science fiction tends to have a colonialist perspective.
just a little bit.
Yeah. Like it's like aliens.
Yeah.
When we think about aliens, they're scary. We don't know anything about them. They're usually coming to take what we have, coming to kill us. I mean, it's the general narrative of xenophobia, coming to kill us, or we're going to plunder what they have. You know, it's as opposed to seeing them as other, I mean, like, other people with a capital P, you know, that you want to friends with, interact with, have a more rounded out experience with, you know? Yeah. So I think that's where traditional science fiction has a very Western um, colonialist point of view.
And
And
go ahead.
yeah, and African futurism, it doesn't.
Well, I have to say that, taking in some of your named work at the Smithsonian Museum, and the exhibit that they had, African futurism, it's absolutely cool. So it was kind of interesting to be able to share that with family and walk through. Sitting here with you right now. I could be a family. Let's see here. Did you self-publish your first book?
No.
Okay.
First book was published by Houghton Mifflin.
Okay. Can you talk about the process of getting your first book published?
Yeah, I can, because it's like there has been little that I've done that has been a straight line, you know. And I knew that. I knew. So Zara the WindSeeker, that's my first published book. It's not the first book that I've written. It's like the fifth. So, you know, I think that's really important for people to know, because it was a lot of writing before I got to that point. But so Zara the WindSeeker, young adult, science fiction, fantasy, whatever you want to call it. It's like a blend of
Your style.
Yeah, exactly. You've got plant towers, you've got cars that are run on electricity producing plants. Yeah, and then you've got a girl who fly. We know where that came. But yeah, so that was the first book that I had published, and I knew that it was published in 2005, which, I mean, I guess you can now say those were different times.
Yes.
I've been around long enough to be able to say that. And what I mean by that is, at that time, to have a Black girl on the cover was like, I mean, taboo.
Yeah.
You know, it was like
Because we didn't do science fiction.
yeah, well, it was that, but also there's this belief that if you had a Black person on the cover, it would sell less.
Yes.
You know, that's also called systematic racism. It's like, and the way that they, but yeah, so I wrote this novel, Zara the WindSeeker, and I knew there was not much like it out. You know, there was not much like it out there. If anything, there probably wasn't anything like it. I mean, there's Virginia Hamilton, that's
Drop one name.
yeah, that's like, I mean, Octavia Butler was doing her thing, but this was young adult, and it was Nigerian rooted, whatever it was. And so I knew that its path was not going to be simple or easy, and that was fine. And so, like, I don't know, I guess I might have been something that I learned from my parents, but like, because I knew it wasn't going to have that path, I didn't think, oh, well, who's going to read this? There's never a time where I was like, oh, woe was me. Never. I just knew, I'm like, okay, just got to find the different door. And so the way that I did that was, I don't know, it wasn't conscious. I just was like, I was interested, not only was I a writer, but I was also interested in stories and interested in books. I loved reading. I enjoyed writers, you know? And so, how do I tell this story? It was kind of all over the place, but a whole bunch of things came together at the right time. And one of them was that Tananarive Due, who is an amazing, I guess you call her a horror writer, but speculative fiction writer, and I loved her work. Her work scared the heck out of me. And I went to a thing where I met her, and somehow she ended up helping me get my first literary agent. It was her previous literary agent was my first literary agent. So that happened. And she was also African American. And then Tananarive Due was African American as well. And so my agent was African American. And then, like I said, Virginia Hamilton, I'd read her works and I loved her works. And I knew who her editor was at Houghton Mifflin. And I'd sent something to her some years before, and she was like, "Oh yeah, keep writing or whatever." And when I finished Zara the WindSeeker, I knew that I wanted to send it to her. Like specifically, like I knew the editor that I wanted to send it to. And she happened to be at Houghton Mifflin at the time. And my agent happened to have gone to high school.
Oh,
Yeah. So it was like because I told my agent, I'm like, oh, I'd like to send it to Andrea Pinkney. That was her name, Andrea Pinkney. And so Andrea Pinkney had been Virginia Hamilton's editor. Virginia Hamilton had recently passed, and we were all sad about that. And I remembered I wanted to send Zara the WindSeeker to her because she was Virginia Hamilton's editor, and I love Virginia Hamilton. It just made sense. And Virginia Hamilton wrote "The People Could Fly." So it's like all these things were just coming together. And so my agent was like, okay, yeah, I can send this to Andrea Pinkney. And she did. And Andrea Pinkney was at Houghton Mifflin. So she was not only an editor there, she was the publisher of the children's department, which meant she was in a position of power where she did not have to go to the money people with something. She could just buy something if she wanted. And so she read Zara the WindSeeker and was like, I love this. Oh my God, I'm buying it. That's how my first book happened. And it wasn't
straight line.
no, not at all.
But a lot of interconnection.
Yes.
Almost as if the ancestors had put it out there for you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, and, going back to the whole futurism, contemplation. that
Yeah.
it's had.
Yeah.
So
And also the flying woman thing.
yes,
It just keeps coming back. It's The People Can Fly was really pivotal for me. That was the book, Virginia Hamilton's book, that just always stayed with me. And then that kind of just kind of led me where I needed to go.
it kind of gave you some wings.
Exactly.
Um, how different is the collaborative process now with publishers?
It's so I've been okay. So that was my first novel, was 2005. So fast forward to lots of novels, lots of novels, and lots of experience. And the lessons that I've learned is to find those editors who will take chance, who not only will take a risk on you, but it has to go beyond risk at a certain point, but who understand what it is that you're doing, like really understand it. And so over those years, it has to be an editor who's going to be at that publisher for a long time. And so I found 2 or 3 of those. And so now they have a lot of faith in what I do, and they're just like, they'll go wherever I want to go, which is wonderful because I often want to go to strange places.
Well, and we appreciate that you want to go to strange places. Which of your books was the hardest to write?
I think probably, okay, there are 2. Well, the one that I have coming out, but the one that I have coming out in January, called Death of the Author. That's my next adult novel. That was the hardest to write. That one was easily the hardest to write. And yeah, we'll skip why. Because it's hard to talk about why. I'm like, I'm at some point I will be ready to talk about it. I have to, because it's coming out, and I can't seem to talk about it. This is the 3rd event where I'm just talking about it. But we'll talk about Who Fears Death. Who Fears Death was my second, up until Death of the Author. Who Fears Death? These books with death in it.
There seems to be a theme here.
I know. I'm like, oh boy, yeah. When I named it Death of the Author, I was like, oh, I wrote another death book, and they're both. And yeah, I know why. But Who Fears Death was Before Death of the Author was the most difficult for me to write. That one took me 6 years to write, and it started with the passing of my father. Like I started writing that on the night of his wake keeping. Who Fears Death starts with a young woman who is at her father's wake keeping, and she's looking down at her father. She's looking at his face, and she's thinking that it doesn't look like him anymore. It's a spirit and stuff. And then some things happen. And when I wrote that was the first part of the first thing that I ever wrote with that novel. And I wrote that the night of my father's wake keeping, very close with my father, like very, very close. And it's autobiographical. Like that's taken from, there was a moment where I was in there and somehow found myself by myself in that room with him, and I was looking down and seeing that his face it didn't look like him anymore. And I remember feeling like at one point just like something very powerful was coming in, and it was through the ground into me, and that I felt like it was going to destroy everything in that room. And then I remember at some point my mom and my sister came and just took me out of that room. And so that was when that stayed with me. It stayed with me ever since. And that was what caused me to write that beginning of the story. When I wrote, I don't outline, I'm like one of those who I don't write in a linear order, and I don't outline. But I just had the scene when I sat down to write that, and it was from that moment. And in Who Fears Death, something mystical happens where she puts her hand on her father's arm, and his body starts breathing. And then just a whole big mystical thing ends up happening. But that was where I got that from. And when I wrote that opening scene, I didn't know anything about the story. I just knew that there's this girl, and then my storytelling mind started adding details. This girl, everyone in her village is there, and everyone hates her, and you don't know why. And she looks strange. All of these other details, but the core of that moment was real. And that went into that theme of death and pain and what I was going through. I just kind of poured it all into that novel. So that novel it still is the darkest novel that I've ever written. And writing it was cathartic. Like, yeah, it's heavy, and I still have a hard time reading it. There's some scenes in there where I can't. I tell people, I'm like, don't expect me to do this again. Don't expect me to go into like that kind of darkness again, because that with Who Fears Death, it went really, really dark. And it was like, there are consequences to writing dark things that are based in, it may be a speculative story, but it's based in our world, it's based in realism, it's based in truth, and there are consequences to that. I'm glad I wrote it, but I don't think I can do that.
Well, we're appreciative that you were able to share that with us, share your whole self. And it takes a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Glad that you're here with us this evening. Thank you. To share that portion of the story. On a lighter note, what was the easiest book to write?
Oh yeah, easy. Oh, it's a good. I don't think I've ever been asked that. Easiest. Sounds weird, but I'd probably say Zara the WindSeeker, because it was I wouldn't say it's a fairly straightforward hero's journey, and it's just all fun. It's funny that I went on to write this dark stuff, but yeah, Zara the WindSeeker was just all fun, and it was just me having fun. And there's how bugs. There are lots of bugs, lots of bugs, and it's like basically Zara the WindSeeker is all about this girl who, she has this ability to fly, and she wakes up and it's mysterious. She does not know why or whatever. And the thrust of the story is she has to go into the greeny jungle to get something and get the egg of a very insane creature. You know, that's all. That's what the story is. And then she has to go into that. And so the jungle is, and she has a field guide, which is very much, you know, I love the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And yes, yes, it's very much like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's an ebook type of thing, and it has like, and it's incomplete, and things are wrong. It's like broken, and but it's like a field guide of all the creatures in the greeny jungle from the explorers who went in and some of who didn't come out and all of that. It's very dramatic. And so I got to write the field guide. And I've written more. There's so much in there that is not in the book because I was just having fun. It was like in her adventures there, she goes in on foot. She has to go 400 miles into this greeny jungle. And one of the things that she comes across, which is not in the book, was just like these bush cows. Okay, so the bush cows are like these creatures. They look kind of like the woodchucks you guys have around here, and I love the woodchucks. But with dexterous hands, and they like to steal things. And so, and they do rob her backpack. But yeah, they're just having a party in the jungle. You know, they're playing the drums and stuff. And I kind of just wrote that scene. And I remember my editor saw it. She's like, this has nothing to do with the story. You need to take this out. But yeah, it was just it was a fun book to write. You know, it's just 100% fun.
Well, going to go on something a little bit fun in the same vein, which is this is a library audience. So I have to ask, can you tell us about your two cats?
Oh, my cats.
Especially the one that's featured, Space Cat graphic.
Yes. Yes. Space Cat. Okay, so yeah, I have a graphic novel coming out, and I just saw the cover too, like a few days ago. And it's called The Space Cat, and it's about my cat. And I am okay, so first I have to preface it with it's I have two cats. I have a periwinkle, who is an oriental short hair. So he's a I don't know, the way the guy at the airport I was traveling with him said, strange cat. That's a weird looking cat. So yeah, he's got a very triangular head and very big ears. And then I have and then there's Neptune, who's a Sphinx cat. So that's a hairless cat. And they love each other. They do. They do. And so I'm a first time cat owner. This is the first time I've ever had I did not grow up with cats. I had parakeets and doves and guinea pigs and hamsters, but not
cats.
Never a cat or a dog. So this is like this bond is real. And so Periwinkle is when I first got him was a problem. I got him from the breeder, and he was nice to the breeder. He was nice. You know, and I see all the posts people make of their cats, and cats look all smushy and nice, fun and nice. So this cute little kitten, beautiful kitten, and he was white too. He started off white, did not stay white. But get him home, and he became a demon.
Yeah.
He was a demon. He was just awful. Like, and I never had a cat, so I didn't know anything. I'm like, what is going on? Why does he hate me? Hates me.
Man.
You know, he would hiss. I give him food, and he'd hiss and then eat the food. And I give him water, he'd hiss and then drink the water. And he'd just swipe at me. And I was going to book signings with scratched up hands.
And people are probably wondering,
yeah,
if you've gotten into MMA or something.
You know, and so it was bad. And I remember in the first 2 weeks, I was trying my best. Just trying my best. And it was really stressful. And my daughter was, you know, she was in high school, so she would just go and leave me with the demon. So it wasn't like she was dealing with it. And yeah, in the first 2 weeks, I took him to the vet. The vet says, oh, you know, I have never seen in all of my 30 years of practice, I have never seen a cat behave like this. Something is mentally wrong with him. You need to send him back. The vet said that. And so I started thinking, I'm like, oh, I think I should send him back. And then I called the breeder up and explained to her what was going on and asked me, what do I do? What do I do? She's like, these were her exact words. He will never love you. Bring him back. And so I was like, okay, I've got experts telling me this. I know nothing about cats. Something's wrong. Okay. So I was going to bring him back. And then my daughter came home and I told her, okay, we're going to take him back. And my daughter said, no. She was like, no, We've had him for 2 weeks. He's ours. He's ours. And I don't know, there are times when I listen to my daughter. There are times, this was one of those, like, where I just go with what she says. And I just was like, okay, fine. And in my head, this is how I made it in my head. I just said, I'm going to be content living with a wild animal. That's how I said it. Like, we're going to live with the wild animal. It will be okay. I'm just going to live with the wild animal. And so I went with that, and then just went back to getting scratched up. And this went on for 3 months. Just terrible. Like, I couldn't pick him up. You couldn't pick him up. I used to dread. I'm like, if there's a problem, I'm not going to be able to pick him up. He's just going to go crazy and all of that. And then one day I was at my computer and just typing away, working on something, and he jumped on my lap. And I was scared. I was scared. I was scared, and I just didn't move. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. He's gonna scratch me. He's gonna do something. He's gonna go. So I just didn't move, and then he just kind of got comfortable. And I'm like, okay, okay. And then he started making a weird sound, and I didn't know what it was. What is that? It was purring. I didn't know what purring was. And I'm like, okay. And from that day on, he has loved both of us. Just been a saint. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre.
Maybe he was going through a teenage spurt.
Maybe, but from the beginning, it's a 4-month-old. I don't know. I'll never know.
There was a little bit of brokenness going on.
He was a saint to the breeder. He was a saint. He was loving and licking your hand and everything.
Well, he was trying to get out of the house, probably.
I don't know.
So,
See, you're just making excuses for bad behavior.
I'm trying to say he's a trickster. I mean, he was,
yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that.
He's trying to sell himself short. Going.
Yeah, he's a saint now, and like, he loves me, and I'm the only one who can like pick him up. My daughter can pick him up too, but he's mine.
Yes,
he's mine. And
he's
then
claimed you.
Yeah, he's basically claimed me, and he's mad that I'm not there right now. He'll be okay. He'll, like, if he sees I have a cat camera and I'll talk through it, and when they hear my voice, he's the one who will come and just slap the camera. He's just like, you're not here, you're not here. But and then we got Neptune, who's a Sphinx cat. And he's like the opposite. He just loves everybody. He acts like a dog. He loves everybody. So that was a relief. It was a relief
to come with one that was kind of pre-programmed.
Yes.
To love on people.
Yes.
So
exactly.
Space Cat.
Yeah, and so Space Cat is, of course, after going through that experience where I basically learned about unconditional love. It was just, I decided to love this wild animal, and then his behavior changed. I'd never seen that with an animal, where their behavior changes towards you. And so that was just really, it was just a profound lesson about, unconditional love, and then just the bond, the creation of that bond. So of course I'm going to write about it. Of course. So like, he acted like an alien from the moment that we got him. So yeah, Space Cat just stuck immediately. This idea of this cat that has a parent or parents from, like, his mother is from Earth, and he has multiple parents from space, from Neptune in particular. So yeah, it was during the pandemic, during lockdown, where I came up with this whole story about Periwinkle the cat and the space cat and his adventures. And that's what that graphic novel is. I also wanted to, like, I've loved Garfield. I love Garfield, and then just comics in general, and then Snoopy as well. So I love this idea of I love stories that are from the perspective of non-humans. I love them. They just, and I once again wanted to read more of one, and wanted to read one where, I don't know, it's just very grounded but connected to the humans, but grounded in this way. And so Space Cat is very much that. So that story that I just told about being the demon and then choosing the love, that's right in there.
Okay.
Like that's how the Space Cat starts. And then you learn more more of his story. So yeah, it's a beautiful graphic novel. It's illustrated by Tana Ford, and I worked with Tana on Black Panther, and then also a Venom verse short. So we've worked together before, and then she also illustrated our graphic novel LaGuardia as well. So we have like a strong relationship, and with this one, it was more collaborative than ever. Like having the time to just really take our time with it, spread out, and the art and the words combining in a more fluid way. So it's a really beautiful book.
Can't wait to read it. So, um, you've touched on it. You've written for different mediums, books, graphic novels, films, TV.
Mhm.
What's similar and what's different about writing these very ways of telling stories?
I think the similarities are stories. All like that what's the word? I mean, that mystical kind of intoxicating aspect of storytelling is there in all the various capacities. It all like the story comes from the same source with whether it's novel, graphic novel, comics, film, theater, it comes from the same source, which is, which is wonderful. But like there are a lot of differences. There are a lot of differences. For example, with novels and just long form prose and short form prose. For me, I don't outline. I don't. Um, I'm not a linear writer. When I start something, I don't even know what it is. Like I don't know if it's a short story or if it's a novel. I just start something, see where it goes, and wherever it goes is what it is. Like I don't apply length to anything, and like and I have that freedom. It's just prose writing. It's very free. I love it. You can do anything with it. You can even mess with what the words look like visually, like all of that, which is something I learned. But but yeah. Now when it comes to comics, however, you go in already knowing how long it's gonna be. You know what the length is. Like when I was writing for Marvel, you would know, okay, it's got to be this number of pages, and then you're already writing the story to that length. And then also with at least with Marvel, you would have you do an outline first. And so I don't outline. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, that must have been difficult
yeah,
for you.
it was like, and that was part of like I like learning. I have two masters and PhD.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm somebody who I like learning. I like the discomfort of having to figure something out and having to just kind of master something. I like that. So when it was Marvel that came to me, they just showed up in my email.
Like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, basically, like, would you like to write Spider-Man? I'm like, no. Like, no,
That's not my kid.
that's not, that's a little aggressive. But yeah, they came to me and and so when they did come to me, I was like, I had to think about it. I had to figure out, do I want to do this? Whatever. And what made me do it was that one, it was kind of cool. And then also the adventure of it. It's new. Like this is a collab. This is very different from writing a novel, which is very, you have your editor, yes, but the crux of the work is on you. It's solo. It's quiet. It's all you.
It's kind of like being a tennis player.
Yeah, exactly. Because I preferred singles. I did not do doubles. you know. But with comics, it's collaborative. You've got a whole bunch of elements. You've got the illustrator, the colorist, the letterer, your editor. There's so many elements to comics where, and that means, and with each of those elements is story. Like there's story in the lettering. There's story, of course, in the illustration. There's story, like, so it's not just the story that you're writing, the narrative of it, but there are layers of narrative in comics. So it's like it's just a different beast. And and the first thing I thought was, oh, I'm gonna hate this. And that made me want to do it more because like one thing that I do, like when it comes to stories, if I'm terrified of writing the story, I know I have to do it. And if it's something that I'll hate, I consider it. It's something that I should consider because it's like I know there's a lesson in there for me to learn that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. So with comics, with Marvel in particular, because that was a very specific comic experience. So that was one of the reasons why I agreed to do it. Also, there were some things that I wanted to correct with Wakanda, but that's a different. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had a problem with Wakanda in general. Like the concept of it just didn't make any sense to me, and I wanted to. And initially when because it was like it was like a slippery slope because first I did the Venomverse short because that was the first thing because first they offered me Spider-Man and I was like, that's too much. I'm not jumping in the deep end when I don't know how to swim.
Yes.
So I'm not doing that. And plus I can't quite relate to
Peter
that.
Parker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just can't quite relate. And so they're like, oh yeah, okay, well you can do a short for Venomverse. And so I like to start small. I'm not gonna just whatever. Like I know a lot of people, if they were offered Spider-Man, they would have jumped at that. They would have definitely jumped at it because it's a big deal. But for me, I like to build my way there and be comfortable and feel natural. So yeah, so Venomverse, it was a very creative kind of like I could come up with a story. I could choose what characters that I was going to deal with and all of that. And it was short. That was the main thing. It was short. I can get a feel for it. Do I like this or whatever? So we did the Venomverse story. And, I was like, okay, this is cool. Near the end of that was when they asked, I can't remember which one it was first, but I think it might have been the Dora Milaje limited series that I did with Wakanda Forever. And so they asked me to do that. And that was pretty aggressive because it was three issues, which meant I had to come up with 3 summaries very fast. And that's the thing with Marvel is it has to be fast. Like it's fast.
Yeah.
Once you agree, you're like, okay, yes, I will do this. Then you've got like days to come up with like a summary, which is scary because you're dealing with these beloved characters. And if you get something wrong, you will hear about it
Continuously.
in many ways.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, with that one, all they asked were like, oh yeah, it's a 3-issue series, limited series. So yeah, Nnedi, it's not anything big, limited, and
No pressure.
yeah, no pressure. And it's gonna be featuring the Dora Milaje, and then but all 3. So the first one has to have Spider-Man in it. Second one has to have Spider-Man and the X-Men in it. So both of them. And then the third has to have Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Avengers in it.
So
That's it.
let's just give you like all the major
Yeah.
teams
Yes.
and players.
And no anything. That was all they said. Now come up with something. That was it.
Do this.
Yes, do this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I remember thinking, that's a lot. And okay, X-Men, okay, then I'll get to write Storm.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
immediate. It was like, okay, Storm. And then but also that's a lot of characters that I'm going to be juggling, but I like a challenge. And so that was what made me say yes to that because it was a challenge. Like, can I even do this? This is so outside of what I would normally do. And so yeah, I did that and turned out, I like what I ended up writing. And so that was cool. And then, so when I got to the end of that was when they asked me to do Black Panther Long Live the King. And so it's like a slippery slope. They were like, and then after Black Panther Long Live the King, then the Unlimited Shuri. So it's like slowly they were just pulling me in, gradually pulling me in. And it was in each of those, it was so fast. The deadlines were so fast. And I was writing other things at the same time because I'm not just gonna do stuff from Marvel's my side gig, so I have my other stuff that I'm writing, and it was that time period was very intense. It was an intense time politically in the comics world, and it was just an intense time because these things were they were happening fast, and I was having to write these things really fast, and then you'd see them out. And then it was just like, it's really, I don't know. I've never gotten used to that, but it was, I'm glad I did.
Well, but we're appreciative that you stretch yourself and you took the second job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, most of us would look at that and go, Marvel coming to us and having that as our second gig, I mean, beside our primary job. Well, that's just incredible. So, um, speaking about, different styles of writing, you've written for many ages, children and young adults. What's your favorite thing about writing for the different stages of life?
I think that for writing for children is fun because you get to dabble in, I don't know, it's just fun. I'm not saying that there's no logic, but there's just there's a freedom in it that's nice. And writing children's books is a lot harder than it seems, even though you're using so few words, but you're using so few words, you know? So is that. For those of us that are very verbose, that's tough. That's tough. So yeah, I really love that. Writing for young adults and adults, the line is much thinner for me. Like it's a little, the way that I go about it is not that different. I think that with writing for young adults, if there's anything, and I don't hold back in writing when I'm writing for young adults, but like if I do have something super dark in there, I feel more of a responsibility to not explain, but like add um clarity in there. Whereas if I'm writing for adults, I will just throw you in and I'm not even gonna give you a safety, anything.
It's
Yeah.
all full bore.
Yeah, I'm just like, you'll be all right. And if you're not, oh well. It's kind of like
Suck
that.
it up.
Yep.
Let her come.
Yep. Yep. But yeah, I think that like all of them have their charms, but like I said, it comes from, especially when it comes to um middle grade, young adult, and adults, those all come from a very similar place.
Okay. Um, Speaking about your books, many of them talk about leaving home,
Yeah.
and yet your characters carry a part of home with them. How have you expressed that theme throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's like core that's a core thing for me. And I think that comes from my parents because my parents, like I said, they came here in 1969 and they didn't plan to stay. They did not plan to stay. They were going to come here, get their doctorates and MDs and go back to Nigeria and take all of that with them. And the reason why they ended up staying was because of the Biafran Civil War happened in the late 60s and they lost track of everybody. And so they ended up staying here. And one thing, like my parents are the type of immigrants who I don't want to say didn't believe in assimilating because they very much became Americans, but their definition of American was broader. Like my mom specifically did not lose her accent. She kept her accent on purpose. She's proud of her accent. My parents, they had all of their children in the United States, but they named all of us have have Igbo names from our first and middle. A lot of Nigerians don't. Like their first name will be something that's more palatable. And then the Nigerian name will be the middle name. But my parents gave us all Igbo names. And it wasn't even intentional. Like they weren't thinking, oh, they need to have whatever. They didn't have an explanation, even though that's exactly what it turned out to be, because that name grounds me. Like having to explain what my name means, having to pronounce it, all of that. So like that whole idea of home being like they brought home with them, it's in them. And so even though they stayed here, it's home is still very significant. And so when they came here, as soon as they remade contact with everybody back in Nigeria, we started visiting there. So it's like it's just they bring it with them wherever they go. And so like my parents taught my siblings and me that. And so like I think that theme just is deep for me. because even for us, we're still very, very connected to Nigeria, but also very American, like in a organic, unforced way. And so I think that that being so specific to me, that being so special, when I started writing stories, of course I brought it forth. And in my novella trilogy, Binti, it's just this idea of her bringing home with her. That comes from that. That comes from everything that I explained. Like she is this African girl in the future who gets on a who gets goes to the finest university in the galaxy, which is planets away. It's 2% human. And when she goes, she brings her culture with her. It's important. She still dresses the same way. She's not embarrassed. And like in a lot of narratives where you have someone who leaves their traditional home, and I would see this all the time where they'd be embarrassed. It would have to be a whole journey for them to be proud of what they are. I'm like, can we have some characters that are proud of what they are and then just take it from the beginning? And that's not part of the plot, and just take it with them. And then what happens when they do that? So that's really where that comes from.
Okay. It was interesting because I had a question about Benti and how you could relate to it on that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds like you answered it quite succinctly right there. So you get that one off. Here's one. What's the difference do you see between someone who's a writer and someone who's an author? Getting a little philosophical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's more like the definition, like an author from what I've heard, and I don't get caught up in labels because I didn't even call myself a writer for. It took me many years before I even used it. I was doing it. I always believe in doing something rather than having to accept the title and then becoming that. But like from what I know, an author is published, a writer isn't. Like that's I don't know. That's from what I know. Like a writer is someone who writes, and then an author is someone who an author is a subcategory of writer.
Yes.
And that's how I know it.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, we'll touch on what does literal success. So jump here. Literary success look like and mean.
I mean, you heard about the way that I started writing.
Yes.
So it's like, from when I started writing, I wrote for 8 years without bothering about it. It didn't cross my mind. I didn't care. I just loved writing, and that was a time period where I wrote several novels and edited and perfected all of that with no intention of anyone reading. I didn't care. So it's like, and I was happy with that. It was like when I was working on my master's that one of my professors was like, oh yeah, maybe you should try to get that published. And I was like, okay. And then just went from, took it from there. It just didn't cross it was never a goal. Actually, none of this was ever a goal. I mean, that's why I'm kind of anti-goals, because it's like, I don't move in that way where I want to do this and then you go do it. I don't move in that way. I don't know how to describe it, but I'm not very goal oriented, which is weird for an athlete to say. But yeah, so success, what is success? I think that on a very basic level, I think it's just finishing the story.
To some sort of conclusion.
Yeah, finish. That's where I feel the greatest satisfaction is when I finish a story. There's like such a great feeling when you get to the end and you have the thing and it's alive. That moment where it's like, that Frankenstein, that Frankenstein moment of it's alive. It's that's the success. Yeah, where you see the monster getting up. That's the feeling of success for me. It's not the other, like like, yes, making money is great. You know, it's
Pays the
great.
bills.
You know, it pays the bills. And I always have my father's voice in my head because my father was very much, if it doesn't make money, it is worthless. You know, like, and I have that in my head. So yeah, that was something that he put there that kind of kept me going in a certain direction. So yeah, that's always there. But for me, like the idea of success is, it really is, it's finishing the story. You know, I mean, that sounds very weird and basic, but yeah,
I mean, the thing is, completing is very important.
yeah,
You know, and having half, written things all over the place.
right.
That makes you a writer, not an author, I guess. So,
Well, you know, I guess. I mean, in a certain
Certain
sense,
way.
yeah, yeah.
I'm getting the signal that we have to wrap this up. And I've enjoyed our time together. But I do have one final question, which is there anything you'd like to add that I have not included?
Um, Not really. I mean, like, I have a lot of books. So it's like so that means I have a lot of ideas all over the place. So I could go on and on and on. There's just a lot. I mean, I've written a lot of stories, and this is something that I'm just coming to realize. Like when you're doing it, you don't know. But like I remember at one of my book signings, one person came up with every book that I had written. And it was a really high stack. And all I could think was, I did that. I did all of that. What? So yeah, I mean, there's so many, like, in all of my books are different in some way. I mean, there's always a thread that runs through all of them, but there's so many issues and things that I like touching on. We go on forever with that, but this has been great.
It has been fun. You can tell that we just met each other, right? It seems like I haven't felt this comfortable talking to someone in a very long time. And, I truly appreciate that you have come to, St. Mary's County to spend some time with us, and we're appreciative of you being here this evening.
Thank you.
So
Pleasure.
you can always come back. So.
Thank you. Thank you.